Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Mads and this is my May wrap-up. So, a few things before I actually get into the wrap-up itself. One, I am filming outside again. That means that I cannot control the chickens, the goats, the trains, the road work, the lawnmowers, the crows, the falcons, the wind, any of it, okay? So just pretend it's part of a very calming nature ambiance and relax. Two, let's just pretend that I didn't disappear for a year and that this is just the next video on my posting schedule. Thanks. I've filmed since I posted last, but none of those got posted, and I'm trying to get over my perfectionist tendencies. So, all of this, any of the mistakes I make, it's me getting over my perfectionist tendencies. So really, it's actually me perfecting, getting over my perfectionism. I'm trying to psych myself out, okay? Third, I'm getting over a cold right now, so if you're like, man, I don't remember sounding this stuffy, you're a little raspy or whatever, it's because I didn't last time you saw me, but I do now, so we'll work through it. And then, fourth, okay, I have 4 and 5. 4, May was Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander month, and I prioritize reading books by authors that fit into those identities during the month of May. I read them all year long, as everyone should, but in May I definitely that is what I base my TBR around. That is what I prioritize. This May, there were some books that crossed over, whether the Libby Hold was about to go back, or they crossed over for my TBR for the last month. Whatever the reason, there's a few that do not fit into those identities. So when you notice those, I'm aware that I'm aware it was just that legitimately the Jasad Air spoiler was about to go back a week into May, and I hadn't gotten to it in April, and so not a week into May. When did I read it? Yeah, okay, it was going back in the second week of May, whatever. And then so if you notice that, that's why those, I'm aware. And then fifth and finally, I am going to talk about the graphic novels and manga that I read first, but then the rest of these will all be in order. So I read 16 books, including the graphic novels and manga, in the month of May. The first graphic novel that I read was The Infinity Particle by Wendy Xu. This is about a girl who develops a relationship with an artificial intelligence robot that is not being treated like he exists. It was very sweet, very cute. There was definitely some sad elements. There's a trigger warning for abuse, particularly familial abuse. I love the art style. It was very cute. I probably would have wanted it to be a little bit more developed, but it's also a YA graphic novel, and it didn't need to have an entire conversation about what it means to be human and stuff like that. It did, just not as much as I would have wanted, but it was very cute, very sweet. The next graphic novel I read was Witchcraft: A Graphic History by Lindsay Squire and Lisa Salsi. I did not like this one very much at all. I think a big part of that is because what I thought it was and what it actually was were two completely different things. I thought it was going, it's called Witchcraft: A Graphic History. I didn't realize that it was going to focus on one particular woman from history who was a healer and tried for witchcraft. And then throughout it, interspersed, it would be here's a page where we talk about the different types of witches, hedge witches and green witches and whatever, and then it would just go back to her story, and that just plain. And that just really was not what I was hoping for from this graphic novel. The art style was pretty, but it was so boring, and I also felt like I'd been lied to, which maybe that's my fault. I picked it up on a whim, so maybe if I'd done more research, so I'm willing to take the blame for that. The third and final graphic novel I read was the Princess Academy graphic novel by Shannon Hale that came out this year for the 20th anniversary of Princess Academy. Princess Academy was my favorite book when I was 9 years old. I reread that book so many times. I could have quoted it to you, probably. And so, even though I haven't read it in years, I feel uniquely qualified to tell you that this graphic novel is a terrible adaptation. It was really bad. At the end, there's a note from Shannon Hale where she talks about how hard it was for her to write this, and that it took her longer than the actual book itself, and that at one point she decided she needed to just strip away the original story completely and start over, and it is very obvious. A lot of this was to try to modernize the story, and it was not done well. I feel like sometimes authors need to realize that trying to modernize a story and make it connect more with your morals now sometimes creates problems that were not there in the original story. An example of this is she tried to make it a feminist tale this time, add more elements of feminism into it, but that means that she created gender roles on Mount Eskel that had not been there in the original book. So you created misogyny to add feminism, and you didn't need to do that. You're not, in my opinion, again, I haven't reread it, so maybe if I reread it, I'd be okay, that didn't age super well. But the original Princess Academy was feminist. I feel like there were other ways to have that conversation without adding that. I'm going off way too long on this. Basically, not so good. So pivoting from graphic novels to manga, I read 3 volumes of Spy X Family. I read volume 3, volume 4, and volume 5. I'm also watching the show. I say watching loosely. We're on like episode 3 of the show with my sisters. I love this series. It's my first manga series, and I'm glad I couldn't have started with a better one. I love how weird they are. It's so cute. If you haven't read it and you like characters that are just weird to everyone else, please pick it up. If you don't know what it's about a family that comes together all for different reasons to pretend to be a healthy nuclear family, but you have a spy, an assassin, and a girl who can read minds. And it is very cute, and I do recommend it. Now into the novels that I read in the month of May. Now, a few of these are like shorter, so I don't know if they classify as novels. The first one is Fishbone Cinderella by Elizabeth Lim, which I rated 4.5 stars. I got an arc of this through NetGalley, and I cannot tell you how happy I was to get an arc for it. Elizabeth Lim is one of my favorite authors. She's been one of my favorite authors since I got back into reading. I have read everything that she's ever written. None of them are below 3 stars. If I'm doing poorly, I will reread Spin the Dawn. So if you ever see me like Mark on Goodreads, like, she's rereading Spin the Dawn, someone died, probably. Last time I read it was when my grandfather died. So, like, legitimately, people die. But no other author has the ability to transport me with all of her books, and this was no different. Fishbone Cinderella is her adult debut. It is historical fiction / historical fantasy with more historical fiction leaning, but fantastical elements. It's a multi-generational story about a family of women who they have been cursed, and it is delving into that and how it presents. This was fantastic. Some people, their reviews were talking about how they were weeping at the end, and that is not my personal connection with it. I do not think this is the kind of book that'll leave you in shambles, but I do think it's the kind of book where as you're reading it, there's a weight that settles over you, and it just slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger until at the end you just feel so heavy about it. And that sounds negative, but it is a positive about this. It is a slow devastation rather than a dramatic crying fest. I love stories that focus on mother and daughter relationships and the struggles that come from that, and what the expectations that are placed on women and how that is created, how we interact with each other, with also the even deeper dynamics because of what these characters were experiencing due to their ethnicities and the time that they were living in and what they were going through. So yes, I highly recommend that. It comes out in July. I'm saying July 28th. I'm probably wrong. I'll put it at the bottom of the screen when it actually comes out. But please pick it up. I want everyone to read this. The next book I read was The Jasad Heir by Sarah Hisham, and I rated this. This one was also 4.5 stars for me. I have had this recommended to me so many times. I've wanted to read it for so long. I just kept putting it off because it was one of those that I think I was worried. I wanted to love it so bad, and I thought I was going to love it, and I didn't want to live in a world where I didn't love it. You know what I'm saying? So it was really important to me to enjoy this book, and the second that I read it, and if I didn't, then I would have to accept the fact I didn't. That was a lot in my head, but basically I didn't have to deal with that. This was a really good book. Everyone is right. I can never figure out how to describe this. I'm going to use the story graph description. In this Egyptian-inspired debut fantasy, a fugitive queen strikes a deadly bargain with her greatest enemy and finds herself embroiled in a complex game that could resurrect her scorched kingdom or leave it in ashes forever. This was fantastic. I keep saying fantastic. I need another point. I need another word. That is one of my favorite female main characters I have read in a really long time. I loved her so much. I was messaging the people that told me to read it, and I was like, you didn't tell me I was gonna love her. She was fantastic. Again with the fantastic, but she was really amazing. It's weighty, atmospheric, and unique, and the world building is crazy. The magic system is crazy, while also genuinely, it never feels stuffy. You don't feel dragged down by it. And I was really impressed by that. The next book I read was Discipline by Larissa Pham, and I rated this one 3 stars. This is a book about a woman who has released her own book, which is basically a revenge fantasy about a young artist who enters into a toxic relationship where she's being taken advantage of by her art professor. And then her grappling with that and the fact that your art does not stand on its own, and so now that that book is out there, people can comment on it and a bunch of other things. Everyone can comment on it, you know what I'm saying? This was very, very, very boring. If I had not been listening to it as an audiobook, I do not think I would have made it through it. It's really just the main character's internal thoughts for the entire book. That is really all that is happening, and it's just her trying to process, which I get, and I think in many ways it was successful, but at the same time I also felt like it was a disservice to the story because it kind of felt like just listening to someone go over the same things in their head over and over and over again instead of getting any kind of actual introspection, because she was a very isolated character, and I think that that is a testament in and of itself of how much she had cut herself off after everything that happened to her. But I wanted a little bit more. It's not bad. I don't really have a lot to say about that one. I wouldn't necessarily recommend. Sorry, the camera stopped recording. I also don't not recommend it. Okay, the next one is Your Driver is Waiting by Priya Guns. I rated this 2 stars. This was not for me at all. My review is, admittedly, I've never seen Taxi Driver, so I have no clue how this holds up in comparison, or if some of the aspects I didn't like were intentional with the original text. I just know I really didn't like it. I struggled with everything from the writing style to the pacing to the characterization. This book was trying so hard to be funny and witty and damning, but for me at least, it failed on all 3 fronts. I appreciate what the author wanted to do here, and I'm really bummed it didn't work for me. Basically, it is a satirical political commentary about a woman who's like an Uber driver, and it is like examining how she is being treated as a woman of color, and a queer woman, and like what's going on in politics and how white people center themselves in politics. And there were a lot of conversations. Sorry, there was a bee. There were a lot of conversations that were really important. I just didn't like how it was handled. Like I say, I didn't like how it was handled. I didn't connect with how it was handled, and I didn't like it. And that's all I have to say about that one. The next book I read was Celestial Banquet by Roselle Lim, which I rated 3 stars. This again was another one that like I listened to the whole audiobook in an afternoon while playing The Sims, and I feel very neutral about this. This was very much a 3-star YA standalone fantasy, and if you know what I'm talking about, I feel like there's like a very particular group of YA standalone fantasies that fit into this like 3-star category, where it's like maybe not the greatest piece of literature, but it's also like there's nothing, it's inoffensive. The world building was fun, the concept was fun, the food was fun. It, at the same time, like with that, it was not developed very well, and the romance was atrocious. It was a love triangle, and it was a kind of like love triangle where how we were trying to add the romantic angst here was like they were grown-ass gods looking at this like 16-year-old girl and being like, which one of the men are you gonna choose? And it was so weird. It didn't accomplish what you wanted it to accomplish, in my opinion, and it just like kept taking me out of the story, and I'm like, why do all of the adults care too much about this much about these bland boys and their really bland relationship with this girl? So maybe I don't feel entirely neutrally about this book, but it was not bad. I had a fun time. I'm not going to reread it, and I wouldn't like go out of my way to recommend it to people. It's pitched to Spin the Dawn meets The Next Iron Chef, which it did not accomplish that for me, but it may accomplish that for you. The next book I read was That Which Feeds Us by Kayala Kindle, and I rated this 4 stars. I loved this. This is a YA horror about a girl who is looking for her missing sister. Legitimately so well done. Everything I've been saying about like the intention and the execution not matching up, this was a situation where the intention and the execution were so perfectly matched. The horror elements were so intentional, the allegory was so intentional, the conversations had, you know how sometimes you're reading a book and the author has something they want to say politically, but instead of like incorporating it naturally, it feels like you're reading the book and then there's a paragraph that's just like an Instagram comment, like caption of like how they feel about everything going on in the world right now. This never had that. The conversations felt like they were conversations the characters should have been having. They made sense. The horror was dark and creepy and grim and disturbing, but not gratuitously so. It was intentional for, I'm sorry, my foot's asleep. It was intentional for what was happening. My only like thing would be I wouldn't like recommend this to people who don't like horror, clearly, but also if you plan on eating fruit again, maybe don't read this. Okay, the next one was The Burning Queen by Aparna Verma. I rated this 3 stars. This is the sequel to The Phoenix King, which was one of my, like, I really loved it when I read it. I think it was one of my favorite books that year. I really loved the royalty plot, and I loved how it was dealing with the relationship with the gods and religion. This is the sequel, and it took an entirely different direction from where it had been originally. The aesthetic is very different, the atmosphere is very different, the characters you're following are different. Not all of them, but for the most part. The conversation about religion shifts very heavily, and not in a direction that I felt like I connected with personally. But also like the writing style, I felt, I mean, this may have happened in the first book and I just missed it, or like didn't have the same connection, but it felt very like Pinterest Atticus poetry badassery, you know? A little bit of the like, don't test me. That's very much what this book felt like a little bit, and I didn't feel that from the previous one. Could have just been a me thing. But with that being said, this is also an incredibly expansive series. The world building is insane. The characters are all very, they have depth. Okay, the characters have depth. This was disappointing to me after how much I liked the first one, and I'm not necessarily a fan of the direction that the series is taking. I'm hopeful that in the 3rd book, it'll like kind of blend those two books together and I will like get back on track with it. But yeah, right now it's just 3 stars, not bad, just not what I wanted it to be. Next book was Park Avenue by Renee Adia. I rated this one 3.5 stars. This is another audiobook I listened to in the afternoon. I don't remember, it's Pitch is Crazy Rich Asians meets something. I don't remember what it was though. But this is about a woman who gets involved in trying to sort through the scandal of an affluent Korean family. And this was a very fun, short read. I wanted it to be more scandalizing, I will say. There was only one thing that shocked me, and it was at the very beginning, and you didn't know the characters, so like it was just like, why don't these characters speak to each other? I was like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, that's crazy. But then after that, everything was like really predictable, and like, my nose is so stuffy, I'm so sorry. And it was just like kind of the like most basic of like, if there had to be a scandal, that's where it would come from, you know? So in that regard, it was really predictable, and like there's a plot twist at the end. It didn't feel like a plot twist to me. I thought it was just like, we know. I had a really fun time with that one, but at the same time, I also would have wanted it to be a little bit more. But I do recommend it if like you're just looking for like a fun read. The final 2 books that I read in May are both Niveau books. So the first one is The City in Glass by Niveau, which I rated 3 stars. This one is a standalone novel about a demon whose city gets destroyed by an angel and they end up trenched in each other's lives. This is the type of book that would work really well for a very specific person. Like if you heard that description and you were like, I would love that, you probably will. Please pick it up. I am kind of one of those people, but at the same time, I wanted this to be like a full-length novel, and it wasn't, and I didn't expect it to be. I knew it was 220 pages, but once I was reading it, I was like, this needs to be big. I want this to be expanded upon, and it couldn't be with the amount of page count, which is not something that I usually struggle with from this author. Usually the fact they write really short books, and usually that is like a testament to how good their writing is that it's a really short book and I don't need it to be longer because it was so good at wrapping everything up. I wanted more depth. There were some ways that the plot played out that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but it really is good. And then the last one I read was the most recent installment in the Singing Hills cycle, which was A Long and Speaking Silence, and I rated this one 4 stars. This was so good. I had a great time. This is, we're going back in the past to the main character's journey when they like were early in the years of being a monk, and I loved it so much. Getting to see them, it was handled so well. Getting to see them with their immaturity and their naivety, and they had not solidified themselves into like who they were or their care for what they were doing or their beliefs yet, while also maintaining that it was the same character. And I thought that was really impressively handled, and at the same time also creating an interesting plot that matched with the rest of the series and didn't like feel like, okay, we're taking a break from the series to go back and see where everything started. It just felt like another installment of the series, but handled really well with the characters' growth that we see later. And I just thought that was really masterfully handled, and it was really fun. And if you haven't read the series, they're all really short. They're like 128 pages each and like 3 hours of an audiobook. I really do recommend them. I love all of them. There's a few that are not my favorite as much, but then the last few have been really, really great again. And I also, The Tiger Came Down the Mountain, I believe is one of my favorites. I think. A Mouthful of Dust is also one of my favorites, like legitimately, which is crazy because it's a plot I don't usually like if you've read it, but that's one of my favorites. Those are all the books that I read in the month of May. Hopefully I was slightly coherent. I am, again, getting over a cold and haven't filmed in over a year. Okay, I filmed in that time, but not well, and like more I tried to film vlog clips. You're never gonna see those. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I plan to get back onto filming regularly. I'd also like to start making content on my other social media platforms, but again, that's up in the air, and I'm trying to be gentle with myself and also know that I don't need to be perfect to do it, and if that is something you needed to hear, you don't have to be perfect for something to matter. Thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you soon with my June TBR, and if I don't, pretend it did.